There's a hidden pattern connecting Einstein, Steve Jobs, and thousands of brilliant people around the world. It's not IQ. It's not privileged education. It's 5 bizarre habits that most people consider warning signs, when in reality they're marks of disguised genius. Science has finally decoded why certain people seem to live on another planet. Their brains literally function differently. And the most shocking part? These strange behaviors don't happen by chance. They're automatic mechanisms that superior minds develop to survive in a world that thinks too slow for them. In this video, you'll discover the secret signs that separate common intelligence from exceptional intelligence. Get ready to recognize these patterns in people around you, and maybe in yourself. What looks like madness might actually be misunderstood brilliance. 1. The secret power of chosen solitude. Picture someone sitting alone at a coffee shop while everyone else gathers in groups, laughing and sharing stories. Most people would assume this person feels lonely or struggles with social skills. But here's what nobody tells you. That quiet corner might be exactly where breakthrough ideas are born. People with sharp minds don't avoid others because they're afraid or damaged. They retreat because noise drowns out clarity. Every conversation, every notification, every small interruption creates mental clutter. For someone whose brain operates at high speed, this constant input becomes exhausting rather than energizing. Think about how a computer slows down when too many programs run simultaneously. The same thing happens inside a brilliant mind surrounded by too much stimulation. They need blank space to think clearly, to connect dots others can't see, to solve problems that require deep focus. This choice to step away isn't about disliking people. It's about protecting mental energy. Social interaction demands constant attention switching. You listen, respond, read body language, adjust your tone, remember context. For most brains, this happens automatically without much effort. But for someone processing information at a deeper level, small talk feels like running a marathon while solving math equations. Here's something fascinating. Studies show that highly intelligent individuals report lower life satisfaction when they socialize frequently. This flips everything we believe about happiness and connection. While average minds recharge through interaction, exceptional minds recharge through isolation. They're not broken. They're just wired differently. Silence becomes their workspace. In those quiet moments alone, their thoughts can stretch out without interruption. Ideas that seemed scattered suddenly form patterns. Solutions appear that were invisible during the chaos of group settings. This isn't magical thinking. It's simply how focused attention works when given proper space. The modern world punishes this behavior. Schools force constant group work. Offices create open floor plans. Society labels lone wolves as antisocial or troubled. But demanding that sharp minds always stay connected is like demanding that a writer produce masterpieces in a crowded stadium. The environment matters more than we admit. What makes this even more misunderstood is that these same people can be completely charming and engaging when they choose to interact. They're not awkward or cold. They simply ration their social energy carefully, spending it only when it matters. A 2-hour deep conversation with one person energizes them more than a whole evening at a party. This selective approach to connection often confuses others. Friends might feel rejected. Family members worry something's wrong. Co-workers assume they're unfriendly. But the truth is simpler and less personal than people imagine. It's not about you. It's about managing the intensity of their internal world. Their minds never truly rest. Which brings us to another pattern that becomes impossible to ignore once you understand what's really happening behind closed doors at night. 2. When the brain refuses to shut down. The clock shows 2 in the morning. Everyone else sleeps peacefully. But there's someone lying wide awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying a conversation from 3 days ago. They're not anxious in the traditional sense. They're thinking, analyzing, running scenarios. Their mind treats bedtime as suggestion rather than command. This isn't insomnia caused by stress or worry, though it might look identical from the outside. It's something more specific and harder to explain to people who've never experienced it. The brain simply won't stop processing information when the body signals it's time to rest. Thoughts keep flowing like a river that refuses to freeze. What starts as reviewing the day quickly spirals into deeper territory. That meeting at work triggers thoughts about communication patterns. Those patterns connect to something read last week. That article links to a documentary watched months ago. Suddenly, they're 3 layers deep into a mental rabbit hole, and sleep feels impossible. Here's what makes this particularly tricky. The harder they try to stop thinking, the more thoughts arrive. Telling an active mind to quiet down is like telling a racing heart to slow while running uphill. The effort itself creates more activity. So they lie there, frustrated but unable to find the off switch everyone else seems to have. Most people assume this happens because something's wrong. They suggest meditation apps, sleeping pills, or cutting out caffeine. While these might help average sleepers, they barely touch the surface for someone whose brain naturally operates in overdrive. The issue isn't poor sleep hygiene. It's mental horsepower that doesn't recognize business hours. During daylight, society rewards this kind of thinking. We praise people who make connections others miss, who see solutions from unusual angles, who remember details everyone else forgets. But when that same ability continues past midnight, it becomes a problem. The trait that makes them valuable becomes the curse that steals their rest. What's happening neurologically is actually quite straightforward. Their brains produce ideas faster than they can process them during waking hours. So nighttime becomes overflow time. All those background thoughts that got pushed aside during the day demand attention once external distractions disappear. The quiet that should bring peace instead amplifies internal noise. They've learned tricks over the years. Keep a notebook beside the bed to capture ideas. Listen to specific sounds that occupy just enough attention without demanding focus. Avoid screens, though sometimes screens provide the only escape from their own thoughts. Nothing works consistently because the root cause isn't environmental. Friends don't understand why they look tired despite going to bed early. Family members get frustrated when they're grumpy in the morning. Doctors check for disorders and find nothing medically wrong. Because nothing is wrong, technically. Their brain simply runs a different operating system than most people, one without a reliable sleep mode. The really interesting part? Many of their best ideas arrive during these sleepless hours. Thoughts that seemed ordinary during the day reveal hidden depths at 3 in the morning. Problems that felt impossible suddenly show solutions. The mental state between wake and sleep unlocks perspectives that normal consciousness keeps hidden. So they exist in this strange space, frustrated by exhaustion, but addicted to the clarity that late-night thinking provides. They know they should sleep. They want to sleep. But part of them also fears missing whatever insight might arrive if they stay awake just a bit longer. This same mental restlessness doesn't limit itself to nighttime, though. It follows them everywhere, creating a private world that others can barely glimpse from the outside. 3. The art of living inside your own head. Watch someone walk down a busy street, and you'll notice most people scanning their surroundings, checking phones, making eye contact. Then, there's that one person moving through the crowd like a ghost, completely absorbed in something invisible. They're not ignoring the world. They're navigating 2 worlds simultaneously. Their physical body goes through the motions automatically. Feet find the path, hands perform routine tasks, eyes see enough to avoid obstacles. But their real attention lives somewhere else entirely, in a space built from thoughts and ideas that nobody else can access. This internal universe feels more vivid than the external one. Conversations happen in their mind constantly. They debate with themselves, explore different viewpoints, test arguments nobody asked them to consider. A simple question like, "Should I buy this?" spirals into analysis about consumer behavior, environmental impact, personal values, and economic systems. What takes others 2 seconds requires them to examine from 7 angles. This isn't overthinking in the anxious sense. It's thorough thinking. They genuinely can't make decisions without understanding the full picture, which means investigating layers most people never consider. The checkout person sees someone frozen in front of the coffee selection. What they don't see is the complete cost-benefit analysis happening behind those distant eyes. To outside observers, this makes them seem spacey or distracted. Someone calls their name 3 times before they respond. They walk past friends without noticing. They forget where they parked because they were too busy thinking to encode the location properly. People joke about their head being in the clouds, not realizing how accurate that description really is. But here's what nobody appreciates. This constant internal activity isn't wasted time. They're solving problems, connecting ideas, building understanding. While others consume content passively, They're actively processing everything, filing it away, linking it to existing knowledge. Their mind works like a search engine that never stops indexing. The challenge comes when they need to snap back to immediate reality. Someone asks a question, and they need several seconds to surface from wherever their thoughts had taken them. By the time they respond, the conversation has moved on. This makes them appear slow or uninterested when actually the opposite is true. They were just operating at a different depth. Physical tasks become meditation time for mental work. Washing dishes, folding laundry, commuting to work. These activities free their conscious mind to explore ideas. What looks like zoning out is actually their most productive thinking time. The body stays busy while the brain runs wild. They've learned to recognize that glazed look in their own reflection. The expression that makes others ask, "Are you okay?" when nothing's actually wrong. They're just deep in thought, untangling some complex idea or following a fascinating thread to its conclusion. The outside world fades because the inside world demands full attention. This creates a strange social problem. People feel ignored even when they're not being ignored. The person lost in thought might care deeply about whoever's talking, but their attention keeps getting pulled inward by thoughts that won't wait. They miss social cues not from lack of interest, but from divided focus. What makes this particularly isolating is that nobody else can see what they're seeing. They can't share the intricate thought process, the beautiful connections their mind just made, the sudden clarity about something that's puzzled them for weeks. All of that remains invisible, leaving them alone with insights that feel too complex to explain. Yet this internal richness needs constant feeding, which leads to another behavior that sets them apart from everyone around them. 4. The insatiable hunger for knowledge. There's a specific type of restlessness that has nothing to do with boredom and everything to do with an empty mind. It's the feeling that arrives when they haven't learned something new in too long. Most people feel satisfied after a decent meal. These minds feel satisfied after consuming information, and their appetite never truly gets full. They'll start reading an article about gardening and end up 4 hours deep into agricultural history, soil chemistry, and climate patterns. One documentary leads to another, which leads to research papers, which leads to online courses. What begins as casual interest becomes full immersion. They can't just know a little about something. They need to understand it completely. This isn't academic achievement hunting. Nobody's giving them grades or certificates. The learning itself provides the reward. Each new piece of information creates a small burst of satisfaction, like finding a puzzle piece that perfectly fits. Their brain lights up with genuine pleasure when encountering novel ideas or unexpected connections. Friends find this exhausting to witness. Why do you need to know so much about Roman aqueducts? When will you ever use that? They miss the entire point. The knowledge isn't for using, it's for having, for connecting, for building a richer internal model of how the world works. Every fact becomes a tool for understanding something else later. The internet both feeds and amplifies this hunger. Suddenly, every question can be answered immediately. Every curiosity can be satisfied within seconds. But this easy access creates a trap. One answer generates 3 new questions. Each explanation reveals gaps in understanding that demand more research. The rabbit holes never end. They'll lose entire evenings to learning about topics they'll never need professionally. The formation of language, how engines work, the history of timekeeping, mathematical proofs. None of it matters for their job or daily life. But their mind doesn't care about practical application. It cares about knowing, about understanding, about building comprehensive mental maps. This creates weird expertise in random subjects. They can explain the economic factors behind the fall of Constantinople, but forget their own phone number. They know the scientific names of obscure plants, but can't remember where they put their keys. Their brain prioritizes interesting information over useful information. What's fascinating is how this knowledge accumulation actually works. They're not memorizing like students cramming for exams. They're building frameworks where new information automatically attaches to existing understanding. Each fact connects to other facts, creating webs of knowledge that grow stronger over time. People sometimes mistake this for showing off when they share what they know. But usually they're just excited. They found something interesting and want to share the discovery. The enthusiasm gets misread as arrogance or need for validation. Really, they're just hoping someone else finds the topic as fascinating as they do. The downside hits when they're forced to engage with surface-level content. Small talk about weather feels painful. Shallow discussions about nothing important drain their energy. They crave depth in conversation the same way they crave depth in learning. Anything less feels like wasting time. This constant information seeking serves another purpose too. It keeps their mind occupied, gives it something to chew on besides its own thoughts. An idle, brilliant mind can be torture. Learning provides direction, focus, a sense of progress. It's productive restlessness channeled into growth. But there's an emotional component to this pattern that often goes completely unnoticed, creating yet another layer of misunderstanding between them and everyone else. 5. Coldness or emotional wisdom. Someone shares devastating news, and most people respond immediately with comfort and sympathy. But there's always that one person who pauses, nods slowly, and says something measured instead of emotional. They don't hug or cry or rush to offer support. They observe, process, then respond. Everyone else wonders if they even have feelings. This delayed emotional response creates massive misunderstandings. People interpret the pause as indifference when actually the opposite is happening. They're feeling everything. They're just not reacting in the moment because their brain insists on understanding before responding. Emotion and analysis run simultaneously, and analysis usually finishes first. When crisis hits, this trait becomes even more visible. While others panic or freeze, they shift into problem-solving mode. Their mind immediately starts mapping solutions, identifying resources, calculating probabilities. The emotional impact registers, but it gets processed in the background while they focus on what can actually be done. This doesn't mean they lack empathy. They feel others' pain acutely, sometimes more intensely than people who cry openly. But they've learned that emotional display doesn't equal emotional depth. They can care deeply while maintaining outward calm. The two aren't mutually exclusive, though society treats them as if they are. What's really happening is emotional regulation at a sophisticated level. They experience the initial spike of feeling but don't let it override their judgment. They recognize that decisions made during emotional peaks often lead to regret. So they've trained themselves to wait, to let the intensity pass before taking action. This creates relationship problems that seem unfixable. Partners want immediate emotional validation. Friends need visible reactions to feel heard. Family members interpret composed responses as not caring enough. But forcing them to perform emotion on demand feels dishonest. They'd rather give genuine support in their own way than fake a response that looks right. The irony is that their measured approach often provides better help. While others offer empty platitudes or emotional mirroring, they identify practical solutions. They remember important details when everyone else is overwhelmed. They stay steady when stability matters most. But none of that looks caring according to conventional standards. They've been called heartless, robotic, cold. These labels sting because they're so completely wrong. The truth is they feel things deeply but process feelings differently. They separate the feeling from the response, creating space for choice rather than reaction. This is emotional intelligence, not emotional absence. What confuses people even more is that they can switch into emotional mode when they choose to. In the right context, with people they trust completely, they show vulnerability and warmth. But they ration these moments carefully. Emotional openness requires energy and safety. They won't waste it on situations that don't warrant the investment. This selective emotional expression makes them seem inconsistent. One day they're warm and engaged, the next day distant and analytical. People don't realize they're seeing different modes for different contexts. Everything is intentional, nothing is random. They match their response to what the situation actually needs, not what social scripts demand. Their neutral face becomes another source of misinterpretation. While others wear their feelings openly, they maintain composure even during internal storms. Coworkers assume they don't care about project outcomes. Friends think they're unbothered by conflict. Nobody sees the intense processing happening behind the calm exterior. But this constant analysis and emotional control comes with costs that nobody talks about, revealing the final piece of what makes these minds so different from the average experience. Everything we've explored sounds impressive from the outside. The deep thinking, the knowledge accumulation, the emotional control, these traits seem like pure advantages. But living inside a mind that works this way carries weight that never fully lifts. There's a price for being different, and it gets paid in ways that never show up on the surface. The first cost is exhaustion that normal rest can't fix. Their brain runs constantly at levels that would burn out average minds within hours. Even during downtime, thoughts keep churning, making connections, analyzing patterns. True mental rest becomes nearly impossible. They wake up tired, not from lack of sleep, but from a mind that never fully shuts down. Then there's the isolation that comes from thinking at different speeds. Conversations that energize others leave them drained from constant translation. They're always adjusting their communication down, simplifying complex thoughts into digestible pieces, watching people's eyes glaze over when they forget to keep things basic. Every interaction requires code switching between how they actually think and how others need them to think. Nobody understands the loneliness of having thoughts too complex to share. They solve problems in their head but can't celebrate because explaining the solution takes longer than anyone has patience for. They see connections others miss, but mentioning them makes people uncomfortable. So they learn to keep most of their mental life private, creating a gap between their inner experience and outer presentation. The frustration of moving through a slow world compounds daily. Everything takes longer than it should. People need excessive explanation for simple concepts. Systems operate inefficiently for no good reason. They see solutions clearly, but can't implement them, because others don't see the problem yet. It's like being the only person awake in a room full of sleepers. Relationships suffer in ways that are hard to articulate. They care deeply, but struggle to show it in expected ways. They want connection but need excessive alone time. They're fascinating to talk to, but exhausting to be around long term. Finding someone who truly gets them feels nearly impossible because the pool of compatible minds is statistically tiny. The world isn't built for how they function. Schools punish the kid who finishes early and gets bored. Jobs reward constant collaboration over deep individual work. Social events favor small talk over meaningful conversation. Every system assumes average cognition, leaving them constantly adjusting to fit spaces that weren't designed with them in mind. There's also the burden of seeing too much. They notice patterns in behavior that others miss, predicting outcomes that no one believes until they happen. They understand implications that haven't occurred to anyone else yet. This foresight creates anxiety, because they can see problems coming that nobody else will help prevent. Being right eventually doesn't ease the stress of being dismissed initially. The pressure to hide their true capacity adds another layer. People get intimidated by obvious intelligence. They learn to dumb themselves down, to pretend things take them longer than they do, to ask questions they already know answers to, just to avoid making others uncomfortable. This performance becomes exhausting, but dropping it means risking social rejection. Perfectionism becomes almost unavoidable when your mind naturally sees all the flaws and possibilities. Nothing feels good enough because they can always imagine improvements. This drives achievement but destroys satisfaction. They accomplish things that would thrill others but only notice what could have been better. The goalpost keeps moving internally. What makes all of this harder is that they can't explain it without sounding arrogant. Saying, "My brain works differently," sounds like claiming superiority. Mentioning the challenges gets dismissed as humble bragging. So they carry everything silently, knowing that describing the reality of their experience will just create more distance between them and normal understanding. Yet despite everything, despite the exhaustion and isolation and constant adjustment, most wouldn't choose differently. These traits aren't curses they wish away. They're fundamental to who they are, to how they experience the world. The richness of their internal life compensates for the difficulty of their external one. Understanding these patterns doesn't fix the challenges, but it offers something valuable: recognition. For those living this way, knowing they're not alone in these experiences provides relief. For those around them, understanding what's actually happening beneath strange behaviors creates space for acceptance instead of judgment. The goal isn't changing who they are. It's creating a world that has room for minds that work differently, that values depth over speed, that recognizes intelligence comes in forms that don't always look comfortable or familiar. Because these strange habits aren't problems to solve. They're adaptations to having a mind that simply refuses to be ordinary.